is there ever a time for an income tax in the state when we have a tax system where if you were to raise the sales tax, that would do so much damage to low-income people?
To convert ourselves to an income tax?
Not, or a hybrid or something where you have more choice.
Well, you know, the Gates Commission made a number of recommendations, and everybody immediately criticized and said it fell flat and it will gather dust. Oftentimes those commissions and the reports don't occur overnight. It takes several legislative sessions. Example, while I introduced the Rainy Day Fund and Lisa was the prime sponsor on it, it was not the first time, but it passed this year, okay, because we became pretty hard-nosed about it, and I said it was a go-home issue. I finally sent a letter to the conferees in the budget, and I said, we're not going home till we get it done. The streamlined sales tax, that was another recommendation of the Gates Commission. That didn't happen in the first year of its introduction. There have been some hearings on an income tax that were had in the House this year, last year.
No, the Senate actually had.
And the Senate, yeah. So the concept is being introduced for discussion purposes. We don't have an electorate out there that will support it right now. Clearly, when I go across the state, the support's not there. So much of it is how we're going to educate them to the regressive tax system that we have in the state, and how we need to have some sort of conversion over to a partial income tax. You know, we have trouble at the federal level because there's no recognition, really, of states that don't have an income tax. So we get hurt in various ways by virtue of that, and our delegation's always fighting back to be able to make sure we get a level playing field. So, but now's not the time. I can tell you because the electorate isn't there, and the hearings were had, and it just isn't the time. But it's not as if it's not a good idea, and it's not as if it's not one that we shouldn't pursue. It's one that we just have to keep holding hearings and let time pass, and eventually, I assume we're going to get there.
Let me pursue that in just a minute, because it seems to me that for 20 or 30 years you worked on getting human rights protection for sexual orientation, and this year you got partner benefits, and that didn't happen because the general population was clamoring for it. There were certainly interests who needed to be protected, and there were people leading the charge, people saying this needs to be done, it's the right thing to do, and they didn't wait for the political capital to form across the public for that to happen. Won't it take the same kind of effort, some kind of leadership, somebody being on point to make an income tax palatable in the state?
I don't think you could have done the anti-discrimination bill, obviously, 20 years ago. So it does take, and what happened is it grew its own acceptance in the public at large, and that's why the window occurred, and we took the action once that window seemed to be there.
But I mean,
right
I guess
now,
my point is that the people were pushing for it, and I'm wondering if there needs to be somebody to push for tax reform.
But you have had that. I'll tell you, because I was in his cabinet. Booth did a dramatic push, and it fell flatter than a pancake. It isn't as if this is a new idea and it hasn't been pursued historically. Its time will come, but its time has yet to come, and it's one of those issues that we have to continue to constantly have a dialogue about. But right now, that legislature is in fact a citizen legislature, and I don't see the votes in either the House, the votes or the Senate and the House.
I mean, one of the things that's happening, though, is the awareness is growing. I met, for example, with the independent grocers, and the way the B&O tax structure works, it pyramids, so that so an integrated national chain only pays once, but a non-integrated independent chain the B&O tax gets paid at the warehouse level and at the trucking level, and then again at the retail level. And they came and said, this is, I think that the increasing awareness on the part of the business community that the B&O tax has got to go, that it's an uncompetitive kind of tax, both in terms of our national arena, but also internationally, is going to contribute eventually to the momentum. And, having helped put the Gates Commission in place and served on it, and the Rainy Day Fund was one of its top recommendations. I do think at some point in time we'll get the kind of political leadership that's ready, and business and stakeholder interest that's ready. I mean, clearly the key groups that are recipients of the state budget, like the education community, will have to be on board in order to do tax reform as well. I think it will happen at some point as well, but I agree with the governor that we're nowhere close to that this year, especially given the other issues we defined as needed to take on.
Interestingly enough, I had a meeting with Don Burnell of AAWB. It's been well over a year ago, and the complaint was about the B&O tax. And I said, come to me with a restructure. Come to me with a restructure, and I will work with you to push it. And he came back and said, we cannot achieve any consensus at all in an alternative.
AWB couldn't.
Could not.
Because it helps some businesses and hurts
Right.
others.
Correct. So we threw the door open, and they couldn't achieve. We're going to have some consensus in some of these stakeholder groups in order to make this happen. And it isn't there yet.
You would naturally move more towards some kind of a corporate income tax, a net business tax, and I think different industries view that with trepidation. So
Well, it's the evil we know.
that's true. There's also just the uncertainty of the future, and
Yeah.
that's another factor.